maybe to start with, any do you have a particular memory of when you first met Syd as a schoolboy, as a friend?
You know, I was just thinking about that in the studio before I came down here, and I think the first time I met Syd was at a Saturday morning art class that we both attended at Homerton College in Hills Road, Cambridge, when I suppose I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 and he was 8 or 9. Yeah, we used to go and, you know, make pottery crocodiles and paint a bit and whatever.
Really young, actually.
Yeah. Well, I lived in a road called Rock Road in Cambridge, and he lived in Hills Road, he lived about 6 doors away from my aunt. 6 doors? Yeah, something like that. No, less than that. 183 and 187. So yeah, we knew each other. I'm trying to think where he went to primary school. I don't think I went to Morley Memorial Primary School, and I don't remember him there. But you know, maybe he was there, and I just didn't notice because he was 2 years below me at school.
Right.
And 2 years at, you know, 8 is a lot.
Absolutely.
Gets less and less, you know.
Yeah.
The difference between, you know, 8 and 6 is a lot more, as we know, than 58 and 56.
Was there a sense when you were quite close friends as kids, or was that later?
Later. Yeah, definitely later. Yeah. We became close, you know, when we were teenagers. And when we were all sort of pretending to be interested in Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Allen Ginsberg and talking about smoking dope but not doing it, you know, those days in the early 60s. And that was all sort of mixed in with, I mean, I remember when Syd went out and bought a Futurama 3, you know, red sort of plastic guitar, whereas before that people had been fiddling around with acoustic guitars, and music was about C and D, and you know, it was much more Woody Guthrie than the Shadows. But then, you know, Walk Don't Run and Apache and those things, suddenly kids started to... Syd, I remember particularly, you know, would learn to play Apache. And I couldn't play anything at that time, so it was all strange, unknown territory for me.
So he was a Hank Marvin fan?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. He was.
Were you...
You know, you had the whammy bar. The Futurama 3 was the cheap version of the Fender, but it had a whammy bar on it. So you go down.
Which Syd continued to do later with Pink Floyd, actually, isn't it? That sort of...
Yeah, well, yeah, he didn't... I don't think he really pursued the whammy bar in the way that some people did, you know, but he still played... He went back to playing Fenders, you know, he had the Fender Telecaster, I think was the last guitar that he had when he playing with us. That white Telecaster he had covered in Melanex circles. Yeah.
So when you just pushing on to going to London and architectural college,
Mm-hmm.
I gather that your first band was more of a kind of jazz, and Nick and Rick were in that, is that right?
No, it wasn't jazz by any stretch of that imagination. I mean, to go back to Syd and Cambridge for a minute, he played in a band called Jeff Mott and the Mottos. I don't know if you've spoken to any of those guys.
Certainly.
Jeff Mott went on to be in a band called the Something Blues, I think, and I think actually made a couple of records professionally. And I was involved with that band to the extent that by that time I had my aspirations to studying architecture had already been imposed on me from above, and so I was beginning to draw and stuff. So I started doing posters. I remember doing drawing posters for that band. But that was my kind of the sum of my involvement really in music in Cambridge. And it wasn't until I went up to Regent Street Poly to study architecture that I started to play instruments. I bought a Spanish guitar and I wrote "I Believe to My Soul" on it in black letraset, I remember. Makes me cringe a little bit now, but at the time I thought that was super cool.
Who did you admire then, musically?
Well, in Cambridge I'd spent... I had several great friends at school in Cambridge, and used to spend most nights with these guys. A friend of mine called Willa and another friend called Seamus, and we used to go round to Seamus's house. His mother was a strange kind of bohemian lady who'd married an Australian artist called Michael O'Connell in the 40s, I suppose, and they were separated. But Michael had been a textile print kind of artist, and lived next door to Henry Moore in Much Haddam, and they were separated. But she was a wonderful woman, and she used to stay up all night cooking boiled potatoes and sausages for these 15, 16-year-olds as we were then, and we'd go around there and smoke cigarettes and listen, and I mean we used to take amphetamines a bit, I remember, and we were listening to jazz and blues almost exclusively, a lot of Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Huddie Ledbetter, that stuff like that, but also then a very kind of quick phase of Kid Ory, Johnny Dodds, early Dixieland jazz, and then very quickly we latched onto Art Blakey, Thelonious Monk, Charlie Mingus, or and other kind of slightly tougher Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane stuff, but jazz and blues mixed together, and so that's really where my roots and interest in it all lay. Except insofar as music provided a potential stepping stone to sex, You saw those guys on those Aldermaston marches with their guitars singing Woody Guthrie songs and things, with kind of long-haired pretty girls swooning around them, and I thought, wow, that looks like my game. I'm not sure quite what Syd's motivations were. I think I can remember sitting around and playing acoustic guitars with him in Cambridge before I left even. And I remember one day going up to a concert in London, probably a blues concert. I remember going to the Fairfield Hall. Well, I'm not sure if Syd was with me or not. He may have been, to see Sonny Boy Williamson, Sonny Terry Brownie McGee, Lightning Hopkins, and Howling Wolf, and Hammy Nixon, all playing on one evening at Fairfield Hall, which was amazing. Anyway, I remember sitting with a piece of paper with Syd, drawing out what the lineup was going to be and what amps we were going to have. 2 AC30s we decided was it. Put the vocals and lead guitar through one AC30, and the bass and the rhythm guitar and the keyboards through the other one. So there was very much a plan, always. But
so that was before you left Cambridge. You said you were sitting around doing that.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but we always had this notion that when we hit London, I knew it was clear he was going to come up to London as well, because London was the Mecca, and that was where one had to be, and that we would start a band together. And as it happened, by the time he arrived, I was already playing with a few other people, so he kind of joined in.
And they included Nick and Rick.
Nick and Rick, yeah. In fact, Nick and Rick were the sort of permanent ones. There were a bunch of other people who were all at the Regent Street Poly. One guy who was a tutor there, called Mike Leonard, and various other people, who were most of them were there. A few others came in because they had PAs or owned instruments, which was always a good thing if you wanted to be a band. If you had a PA, you were in.
At what point did it become Pink Floyd? And at what point did you sort of move from that sort of blues, jazzy tradition into something which seemed to be going somewhere else, a bit different? Well, I think when Bob Close failed his first year exams, which he did, and his parents
put their foot down and said, you know, I think Bob's parents were Polish or something like that. His father was a wonderful man. He worked in the university in Cambridge as, I think, as a curator in one of the labs, or he was a lab technician, I think, in one of the things. But his hobby was making guitars. He made these beautiful guitars. I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, he put his foot down and said, no, Bob, no more music, you must study now. And so he did. But he was a great player. He could actually play. He could play anything. But the great love at the time was Elmore James, and you know, and so he could play all those guitar parts. He learned them off the records, and he could do all of that. And so when he stopped, in a way, we had to do something else because we could no longer make a convincing stab at that stuff. But we used to do so many of those things. I'm a crawling king snake, I remember, with great fondness. But we used to play a lot of pop as well, or the kind of bluesy end of pop, Rufus Thomas, all those songs, you know, Walking the Dog, and a lot of Bo Diddley we played, and quite a wide, and Wilson Pickett, and you know, so we've had quite a wide repertoire of other people's stuff. But almost no pop. We didn't try and copy any pop songs.
So it was more of a driving, blues-based, sort of rhythm, rock and roll kind of blues.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Mike Leonard was your landlord, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Sort of Leonard's Lodgers, I believe.
Yeah.
Was that the point where it got quite heady, that things seemed to be coming together, that some, I don't know, you were beginning to create your own sort of music, Syd maybe writing some songs himself?
I can't remember when the association with Mike started, but I remember it started really because he wanted some improvised music around the experiments he was doing with light. He had projectors and things, and he would, you know, wrap up tubes of shiny Melinex and shine light through it and crinkle it and see what happened when it hit the wall, and he'd make interference patterns by having two discs moving one against the other and so on and so forth. And we would, you know, play music to it. So I think all that had started happening before Syd actually came up, because the rest of us already shared that flat in Stanhope Gardens in Highgate. What was the question again? I have a very short span.
I know, the question's too complicated. There's a sense of, on the one hand, you've got the traditional, the blues and so on, that you were kind of imitating a bit.
And then we went a bit more pop, you know, and we went a bit more, I think, into... well, we started playing Louie Louie, I remember. Whether that was Syd's influence or not, I don't know, but probably, you know. And then, of course, Syd started to write one or two songs.
Which was sort of forming.
Candy in a Currant Bun, and, you know, those things. I listened to the first demo of those, which, you know, recently. Suddenly somebody gave me a cassette of those early I'm a King Bee we did, and Candy in a Currant Bun, and something else in that first session.
Was Arnold Lane in that?
No, this is way before then. And strangely enough, I think the very first song I ever wrote, which was called Walk With Me Sydney. So you can see that I was kind of very involved anyway in terms of with Syd and all of that. That has a lead vocal, I think, by Rick Wright's ex-wife, Juliet. Because we used to go singing on the tube, you know, for Rag Week and things like that, just to earn a few pennies for whatever charity it was.
What would you say, I mean, Walk With Me Sydney, what would you say was your kind of sense of him at the time? Do you think he was an unusual guy in terms of your group?
Well, he was always very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, Syd. He had an enormous capacity for life, you know, and I thought his painting was great. He was painting quite a lot at the time. And he, was a very bubbly kind of character, full of life and enthusiasm, but also I think he was quite innovative, and I mean you could say his attachment to Kenneth Graham and Hilaire Belloc and all of those kind of influences was quite radical for them, because you didn't expect that kind of literary middle class stuff to surface in rock and roll. And in the same way that later on his interest in Eastern mysticism and in general, and the I Ching in particular, which produced a song like Chapter 24, to start playing around with those kind of ideas was quite radical. He was also he kind of soaked up musical ideas really from other people. He was a great copycat, Syd, in terms of music. He would listen to American, the more avant-garde end of the American popular music at the time. So he would be listening to early Doors, or I'm trying to think of the other bands, and I can't, and I won't be able to, because I just can't remember that.
It was all such a long time ago as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was a star, very attractive man.
That so the sort of innocent, well, the childishness, innocent, sort of naivety in those first songs, which is, it's kind of stunning because it's so simple and so direct. And he's like almost like nothing else in a way. It's like I know some people say it's influential, but in a way no one's really been able to imitate it because it seems so unique in a way.
Yeah.
At the time, it probably didn't feel like there was particularly anything special there.
Well, no, I think it did. I think a lot of it. I mean, maybe a lot of the associations they were always odd, and they became more bizarre, as time went by. But if you take some of the songs off the first album, it's interesting that I had a couple of songs on the first album as well. It's interesting that even my preoccupations were beginning to appear in that. There's a song called Corporal Clegg on the first album, which is sort of, there's my sort of life's work right there in that one little kind of beginning. But with Syd, Bike, I think, is an extraordinary. Well, there were lots of great songs on that first album in that particular style that he developed. But it was the way, part of what was good was the way that he allowed the lyric and the rhythm to attach to one another in a way that was both poetic and musical. I've got a bike, you can ride it if you like. It's got a basket, a bell that rings and things to make it look good. I'd give it to you if I could, but I borrowed it. There's something about the way the lyric attaches to the meter in a very satisfying way, but then but I borrowed it kind of kicks it off into. There's something very English about that, about the completeness of that, and yet the fact that it's so unpredictable. I think it was the unpredictability of it combined with its simplicity that made it so special.
It's almost like it's like a conversation about a bike. There's nothing kind of staged or sort of crafted about it in one sense. It seems so just absolutely.
It's very painterly.
Natural.
It's very painterly. It's like, I remember a painting he did and gave to a great friend of ours called Adrian Taylor, who was a lawyer. No, they bought it. They bought it off him, and it was a picture of Christians and lions, or just lions in the Colosseum. And he got an arched template mask and laid it across the thing and or sprayed it or drew around it and then did it another way like that. So you got this strange perspective. So it's a device. You know, he was good at spotting how to use devices in a kind of meaningful way, I think. And I think the construction of the songs was in some way kind of painterly, if I can use that adjective, if it exists.
Yeah. No, I think it's,
And if it means anything.
it's a good one, actually. Yeah. It's you can almost the sort of the strokes. I mean, it's not geometric or
No.
not like a mathematician
Take a couple if you wish, they're on the dish. You know, that kind of alliteration as well, which is very childish, but is also I'm not sure why it moves us. There must be a reason, you know, why those songs were as good as they are.